Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today I am talking about Rogue One, and specifically I am talking about the character Cassian Andor, and there are spoilers in this content. So, Cassian Andor is by far the most complicated of all the characters in Rogue One. He's played by Diego Luna, and I think he did a fantastic job of playing him. This is a very challenging character to play because I think the complication comes in that we are presented with Cassian Andor as a protagonist, as a rebel, right? And more than any character ever in any Star Wars film, he takes Cassian Andor, Captain Cassian Andor, who serves the rebellion, takes specific actions that are those of a villain, right? And the biggest part is, and so I am going to talk about this right away. I really did have one very major problem with one of the decisions they made in Rogue One, specifically around Cassian Andor's character. And it comes when we are at the beginning of the film, and Cassian Andor is on this trading planet, right? And he's in what looks like kind of like a space bazaar, where there's a lot of trading going on. There's a lot of aliens, and they're eating different types of exotic foods. Excuse me. And you have the Imperials there, and there's lots of Imperials. There's stormtroopers, and Cassian is there, and he is doing intelligence work. He's actually spying to get information about the Death Star. So he's trying to get more information about the Death Star. He's trying to get more information about where Galen Erso is. So at this point, the rebellion understands that Galen Erso has built the Death Star, and that he is the primary architect of the Death Star. And also, like, the rebellion is just now sussing out exactly what the Death Star does, right? So Cassian meets with an informant, right, to get information. And so Cassian does get information, and he's told one of the latest positions of Galen Erso, and specifically he's told him that the Death Star is a planet killer. It is a weapon so large that it can destroy an entire planet. This is a big piece of information. So we're shown, and this is shown throughout the entire film, that Cassian Andor is incredibly competent, and he really is incredibly competent. He's a skilled pilot. He is a leader. He is a crack shot. He's physically capable. He can climb. He is an extremely valuable soldier, right? He's a good tool to have on your belt if you are a rebellion leader, right? And he is a leader himself. He goes by Captain Cassian Andor, and so all of that is important. Now, when he meets this informant, he gets this information from the informant, and then the Imperials start to close in, and the Imperials are doing the squeeze on the entire planet, trying to find rebel sympathizers, right? Including the informant and Captain Cassian Andor, right? So Cassian has to make his escape, right? So he's dealing with this informant, excuse me, and this informant is very, he's like kind of mealy-mouthed. He lacks courage, and he's really afraid that they're going to be captured. And his fear is, freaking himself out. It's freaking out Cassian. Cassian realizes, I only have a minute or two here. I need to do the right thing. And what he decides right then and there is he's like, you know what? I'm going to escape this place. I need to take this information out, and I need for the Empire not to know I have this information, and I need to do this all immediately. So I have no time, right? And so what he decides is to kill the informant, and so he pulls the informant to get in with him, and he speaks to him like a friend, right? Now immediately he betrays the informant. Cassian betrays the informant. And then he murders the informant by shooting the informant in the back. This is, in my opinion, by far the most villainous act we ever see anyone who's presented as a protagonist in a Star Wars film that I can think of. right? And I've seen every movie, and I don't think there is anything like it. The closest thing to it is Han Solo when Greedo comes to him in Episode 4, and it's a famous scene. Han actually shoots Greedo under the table, murdering him. Well, you know what? That's a big question on whether Han actually murders Greedo. I don't think Han murdered Greedo. And the reason why, my point is, Han killing Greedo is different than Cassian killing this informant. And the reason why is Greedo comes to Han, and when those two see each other, they know who and what they are. So there's actually no pretense when Greedo and Han deal with each other. Han is a running fugitive from Jabba, and Greedo is a paid bounty hunter. He's the killer, right? And so these are two men with equal skills and equal weapons, and that is essentially a combat. The moment they enter the room together, it's a combat, right? And so I feel that that's really different, okay? So, but with Cassian, this is a major problem, right? So Cassian uses someone's trust to give himself a position to murder that person. That's a huge problem. That is a huge, huge problem. So I really struggled to really get behind Cassian Andor. Now, I will say, the rest of the film, Cassian spends near the end of the film, I would say the third act, the final act in Rogue One, Cassian does a lot to redeem himself, right? And he actually even acknowledges, saying, I've done things for the rebellion that I'm not proud of, right? Now, Cassian is a really important character and a very interesting character, in that one of the things that's interesting about him is I really feel that they're saying, hey, when the rebellion started, there were people who did things that weren't great, right? Now, it's interesting that they're doing this. I guess they're trying to give historical context, and I can think they're also trying to say all great movements have, challenging starts with people who did actions that weren't controlled. I do think that is somewhat true, in that, when something is being formulated like the rebellion, you are bringing a lot of parties together, and those parties don't always have the same rule set. They're coming from different places, right? So Cassian Andor is a really, I think what he is he's a point in time saying there was a time when the rebellion used any tactic it could to fight the Empire. And General Dravitz, he dealt with Mon Mothma and Cassian Andor, and he gave Cassian orders to kill Galen Erso, right? And so Cassian is dispatched as an assassin, right? So Cassian is always being shown as at minimum a killer, sometimes an assassin, and we actually seen him as a murderer, right? So he is really just steeped in blood, right? And that is really problematic from the perspective of a protagonist, right? And now one of the things that happens is Rogue One ends with the death of every major protagonist: Troop Imwe, Baze Malbus, Jyn Erso, Cassian Andor, Bodhi Rook, all of them. They K2SO, every single one of them dies. They all die, right? And I think one of the reasons why is, a lot of people look at Rogue One and they say, okay, everybody dies, which is true. All the protagonists die. But one of the things that comes out of this film is the really solid foundation of Mon Mothma and how important her leadership is, her specific type of leadership to the rebellion, right? So, she is a compromiser. She's incredibly intelligent, and she is looking out for the rebellion, and she makes decisions that some people like, and she makes decisions that some people hate, right? And so she is a politician's politician, right? And and she's also skilled at being a politician. She didn't come from somewhere else. She is a politician through and through, right? And one of the things that's really interesting about this film is it really solidifies Mon Mothma as saying, hey, when I got to the rebellion we were using assassins, we were using saboteurs, all these kind of things. But by the time we reach Return of the Jedi, the rebellion is fighting the good fight in a good way, right? And that is what Mon Mothma does. She moves the rebellion away from using people like Cassian Andor, who are willing to do anything to achieve a goal, right? And the reason you can't use those type of people is because that's what the Empire does. You know, the end justifies the means, right? And so, one, I really thought Cassian was a very interesting character. I wasn't a huge fan of Cassian just because it was so problematic. Starting the film with him as a murderer, it was really hard for me to get in his corner, and I couldn't, right? So he has a very interesting relationship with Jyn Erso. He is pivotal to the actions and the occurrences of the film. I will say this. So he really is a fascinating character. The other thing is K2SO. K2SO serves him, right? And I'm really curious if he did the reprogramming, right? I think the answer there is no, because one of the issues you do have in Star Wars films is they like to lump a lot of skill sets onto one character, right? So Cassian is a brilliant pilot. He is an incredibly skilled soldier, and he's a leader. It's hard for me to imagine that on top of all of that, he's a good slicer, right? By the way, slicer is a Star Wars term. So it's interesting. In the Star Wars canon, in the movies, there is no term for developer or programmer, right? Which is really interesting. In the tabletop role-playing game, which Disney does own and has approved, they're called slicers, right? So, kind of interesting. And I don't think he has a slicing skill set. So I don't think he reprogrammed K2SO. But one of the reasons why I'm calling this out is just from the sheer, considering the power level of Cassian Andor, he's incredibly powerful. Just the amount of danger that he can bring into a room, in any room that he's in, and all that he's capable of, you can add K2SO to that. There are characters within the Star Wars universe that have people who serve them, right? They have minions, right? So in many ways, K2SO is essentially a minion of Cassian Andor. The same way R2 is a minion of Luke Skywalker. The same way Chewbacca is a minion of Han Solo. There's a lot of them, which is really interesting. Does Leia have a minion? Very interesting that the noble actually doesn't have a minion. It's really interesting. So Cassian Andor is a really fascinating character. Of course, in the end, he does he redeems himself by bringing the actual forces that forge Rogue One. So when Jyn Erso says to the rebel council, the collection of rebel leaders, saying, "Hey, we have to go get the Death Star plans right now," they turn her down. And Jyn goes away defeated, right? Rejected. And the first person that is on board with her is Trude Imwe. Baze Malbus lines up immediately. Bodhi Rook agrees to go. And then Cassian Andor shows up with, no less than like 10, 15 soldiers, all who are just like himself. Pure killers, like saboteurs, assassins, just straight, very high-end soldiers, right? And so without Cassian's competence, without his the alliances that he had forged within rebellion, without the men that trusted him, Rogue One would not have had the sheer manpower in order to steal the Death Star. So, and then even as he goes to Scarif and uses this force of soldiers who are loyal to him, loyal even beyond their loyalty to the rebellion, right? He then continues to redeem himself by staying right with Jyn Erso, and helping her climb and get the plans, and actually, he's beaten bad. He actually takes a fall in the tower where they get the data, and he has to, essentially push himself through that pain and get to the point where he actually shoots Orson Krennic right before Orson Krennic shoots Jyn Erso, right? So he redeems himself time and time again. He redeems himself by forming Rogue One. He redeems himself by saving Jyn Erso. Before any of those events, he also redeems himself by going against his rebel orders and choosing not to assassinate Galen Erso. So very, very interesting character. I wanted to like Cassian Andor more than I did, but that was one of the most, showing that action at the very beginning. It's tough. It's really tough to get behind. I think I understand where the writers were going. Sometimes you have to make big decisions to make great stories, and I think they went a little too far on that one. But that's my take on Cassian Andor. Thank you very much. Have a great day.